you. Excellent. Thanks, Wanjiku. And I'm just starting recording now. I think everybody would have got a notification there, just in case people that can't join can watch this as well. Excellent. All right. Well, making good progress here. I think what we need to do, I don't think we need the full 2 hours. Hopefully we don't need the full 2 hours now, but we'll see how we go. What we want to do is really look in depth at this PAiCE tool, and that's because, as I understand it, everybody on the call is going to implement, either as a process or technical facilitator, this tool. So we want you to get really familiar with it. For those, I'm hoping that everybody on the call is relatively familiar with the tool, but for those that haven't, I will put in the chat a link that you can, it's just like a little promo link that you can use. Let me find the chat box that you can use just to understand PAiCE, or you can even send it to when you're starting to organize participants as well. That is not the right link. That is the training link. I will get that link for you as well. It was in the emails. It's just a 4-minute video around what is PAiCE and what we're trying to do. But the idea here is that we've got the opportunity to take a global view. To take a global view around climate adaptation, but also to be quite specific to the regions that everybody's working in as well. So the tool that's been developed is meant to help guide you in different locations around prioritizing the different climate adaptation options. So we often think we've got all of these different adaptation options. Which one is the one that we need to invest in to get the best benefit in a particular geography? Now, of course, because this is a global program as well, what we're hoping is we can actually aggregate that and take that up to a global level and do something quite powerful as well. So it's designed to be useful for each location that you're doing a workshop, but also to aggregate up so that we've got a global view as well. So that's why we're taking that standard approach. What are we going to do with that? Well, we're hoping that it will help firstly guide excellence in agronomy programming, but maybe also more broadly in CGIAR programming and government programming. You can take this tool and use it again in different locations for your own purposes as well, for the government officials if you want to use it there. You can use it wherever you like to start to help guide you in your climate adaptation programming. But what we're really trying to do is question, what is it that we need to prioritize to make sure that we are adapting to a changing climate? I hope that makes sense. I will stop for a second and just ask the room, did anybody have any questions about the purpose of the tool, the purpose of the training, or anything at that higher level that they wanted to discuss with the group? Excellent. Yes, please, Ajit.
Hi, thank you, Brandon, for this nice introduction. I'm Ajit from ICADA, coordinating the Egypt use case. And this tool seems to be quite interesting and have very diverse applications, not only from an initiative point of view, but also in terms of multilateral banks interested in investing in CSA actions in various countries. So my question to you was that, is this tool currently planned only for the excellence in agronomy, or you also indicated that other across the CG can be used? So if that is the case, are there initiatives beyond excellence in agronomy? That's question number one. And my second question was that, is this tool specifically focusing only on agronomy or adaptation in general for the agriculture sector? That means water resources, the usual on-farm climate adaptation, digitalization, things of that sort. And I mean, what adaptation at what scale are we talking about? Thank you.
Great, thanks for those questions, Ajit. Really good questions. The first one around, is it just for EiA? At the moment, you are the first 30 that are being trained in the tool. So you guys are the trendsetters, and it's something that's been funded through EiA. So we're using EiA as a starting point, but by no means is EiA the end point. So what we're hoping is to do this. We hope that it will become useful for, we'll see that it's useful, and it's something that we can then say we're ready to take beyond the EiA ecosystem and beyond. But we didn't want to do that before we've made sure that everybody finds it useful. We find all the bugs. We make sure that this is something that is useful to go beyond. So I hope that answers your first question. In terms of your second question around what scale of adaptation, so you'll see as we move through this training that this is set up specifically at a crops level. So you're framing a system in terms of the crops that are there, and then taking it through beyond the, so looking at the climate hazards and the adaptation options in reference to a cropping system. So when we first built this, it had livestock in there as well. What we've said is we need to scale that back in a first version and just look at that crops level. What we hope, once we work out that this is working, that this is good, that this is useful, then we can have these add-on modules. So livestock is the first one, the first obvious one to look at in terms of the adaptation story in each location, and then to build out from there. But it is very much at a cropping scale at the moment, with the possibility to build additional modules in for those different other levels of adaptation. In terms of the actual scale, you don't run this at a farm level. So you do run this at an agroecology level. So we're talking, you know, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of hectares is the scope that we're looking at. You can run it at a smaller scale, but it's less useful to what we're trying to do here at the moment. Did that cover both your questions, Ajit?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, Brett. Perfect.
I don't see any other hands up, but please feel free at any point to put your hand up if you've got something that you'd like to discuss. It gives me, I'm not sharing training with anybody, so it gives me a point to rest as well. So feel free to raise your hand as we move through. Okay, so that's the overview of where we're at. Let's just talk about the training program that we're going to go through. So there's been a lot of discussion internally around the training that we're going to give. What I've said is, because it's quite short notice and because these workshops are actually starting potentially in a few weeks' time, what I've tried to put together is a virtual training program to make sure that we've at least got a good understanding of the tool. And that means that, you know, we're not getting on planes, and because we're a global project, it's very hard to pull people together at short notice. So we've got over the next 3 weeks training that involves a 2 hours block. And as I said, we might not use the full 2 hours, where we discuss what we've learned. And then there's some pre-work or homework or whatever you want to call it beforehand, where you just play with the tool in a particular module before coming in. So we've previously sent module 1 to play with, and a video that goes through the different elements of module 1. And I can see about half of us have been able to have a play with that. That will become increasingly important as we go further in the tool, because there is more elements that come through and more complexity that comes through in the tool. So module 1 is very much the simplest of the modules, and then we will continue moving on from there. So this week, we're going to discuss module 1. Next week, we're going to discuss module 2. And the week after, we're going to discuss module 3, each with these 2-hour sessions. The point here is to be discussive in this session. I don't want to lecture you guys for 2 hours. Nobody will benefit from that. So it is the point to say, I don't understand this question. The wording on this question was wrong. When I entered into this box, I got this error and it didn't make sense, and we need to change that. I can't fill it in this scenario. You know, if for some reason in Egypt, this crop, it won't work, let's work it out. So it's meant to be, let's make sure the tool is absolutely ready to go. Because you guys are leading workshops, the worst thing that I can give to you is a tool where you're up in front of all the people in the workshop and suddenly it stops working and you don't know why. Or there's a question there where you don't know what it's trying to get at. So what we're trying to do in this training is to make sure that you guys understand and are confident with that tool. If we get to the end of this virtual training and everybody comes to me and says, I'm still not confident, what we can do then is discuss in-person training. I think personally that the tool is actually not very technical. So I'm hoping that in this 3 weeks, 2 hours a week and some homework, we'll find that everybody is confident in the tool and ready to go. If we get to a point where it's not, and this is what we've discussed with Chi-Chi and Wanjiku and others, if we get to that point where we're still not confident, then we can arrange some additional training, and we'll talk about what that looks like as we move towards the end. But what it does mean to make the most of this is when I send you some pre-work, please do it, because it's about being familiar with the tool and making sure that you're confident for when you go into those workshops. I've sent calendar invitations for each of those 3 online sessions. If you're somebody that hasn't received that somehow, then please send an email or contact me or Wanjiku, and we'll make sure that you're onto those calendar invitations as well. Once again, I'm going to stop and ask, does anybody have any questions about the training program? Excellent. I hope that means that my Australian accent is not coming through too strong and that it's all making sense. All right. So I am now going to share my screen and put up some things. Give me a moment. All right, excellent. Can I get a thumbs up if people can see my screen? Somebody confirm? Perfect, thank you. So just as a quick overview, we talked about 3 modules for 3 weeks. So what I'll actually do is pull up the full tool, if you give me a second. So the full tool has 3 modules, plus some pre-modules. So you'll see down the bottom that you've got P's, 1s, 2s, and 3s. And what you're seeing down the bottom, a lot of these tabs will be hidden away. They're calculation tabs or other things, so you don't have to be worried about. But the idea here is that we've got 3 modules and some pre-modules. Most people, I hope, have had a look at the pre-module. So that's those P's, and basically the key thing is setting out the location that the workshop will cover. We then go into module 1, which we've all had a play with, and that's around the characterizing the cropping system. So the different crops, their extent, and basically their income. So that's where we'll finish today, and next week we'll go into over the coming next week, we'll go into module 2, and that's around the climate hazards. So what you'll see there is it asks for the different climate hazards and then asks you to look at, say, rice in a particular season and the climate hazards that come through. 1 is the economically important crops. What you get at the end of module 2 is the adaptation challenges, the climate hazards that are most important in the system. What you get then in module 3 is looking at adaptation. So it asks you basically to look at the different adaptation options. And it's not going to show anything at the moment because I was playing with it this morning, trying to change some code. But basically what you get at the end of module 3 is here are the things that are most important, or the highest potential adaptation options that we have for a particular location. So this is just trying to give you an overview of where we go. We get the crops and the system that's in a location. We get the climate hazards that are going to impact that location. And then we prioritize the different adaptation options that relate to the climate hazards and the key crops. So at the end, we get this prioritization that says, the best bang for your dollar is to invest in these adaptation options. So that's an overview of the whole tool as we come through. What we said was that we are going to work on today. We're just going to look at the pre-module and module 1. There's a few things that were sent before. So in the links, there was a training program, like a pre-reading video that came through. So I'm going to make one of these for each of the different weeks that are there. And there's a little video of me explaining things and then screenshots. So it's also designed so that you can leave comments. But what I noticed was that perhaps people were watching on YouTube if they did watch rather than leaving comments, because I haven't found any comments in here. But as we move into the next weeks, when I make these, what you need to do is when you've got something that you don't understand, then you just want to leave a comment with your initials and then add a comment that's got the details of what you want to clarify or the problem that you're having as you go. And other people can reply in there. So that was also then made into a video and put on YouTube, which I can see that some people have watched on YouTube, but you won't be able to put in your comments. So that was the first thing that was part of the pre-work. And then the second bit was around playing with a clean version of this. So 2 examples were sent and then 1 clean one. And I will pause for a second. Was it Sama, you had your hand up?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Samar Tahir from Icarda. Actually, I tried to access the link of the PowerPoint copy, but there's something with the permissions and, security authorities prevented me from accessing this link. So I don't know if we can just put the PowerPoint version in more public cloud like Google or something like that, because with Microsoft I have a conflict. I couldn't access it. I only watched the YouTube and I tried to add some comments. I added in the assignment file. Thanks.
Thanks for letting me know, Samar. And maybe there's no comments because of that. The problem that I've found, having worked at CIMMIT and then been in CSIRO and then worked with EiA colleagues, is the different centers have some are on the Google universe and some are in the Microsoft ecoverse, and it's very hard to communicate within. But I will look at a better way to try and make that more accessible to everybody. Thanks for the comment. If not, there is always I'll put it up on YouTube as well so people can come through, and then you just need to email me your notes or otherwise. What we have then, so I think it was about 10 people, and thanks to those that did send it back, and I saw it was about 5 more people that actually sent it just close to the start of this meeting. What we want to do really now is just to go through, starting with each module. If people have anything that they would like to discuss, if there's a question there that you don't understand, if you put something in. So I'll give you an example. I think it was actually Samar, when we were in module 1.3, which is about yield. She sent me a note that said that sometimes the yields are above 20 tonnes per hectare. So these are the sorts of things that we're trying to work through. So what I've done is actually changed the restrictions there so that you can go above 20 tonnes per hectare. So what we really want to do as we go through here is make sure that this works, because you're going to have to do workshops, that there's no oversights in coding, there's no problems or anything like that. That's just an example of what we want to do here. So what we're going to do now for the next little bit is just move through these modules. So the easiest one to start with is P1. Now, this has partially been run in Latin America already. So what they had requested is to set up the tool in Spanish as well. So the question that I have to everybody is, if you think that you would like this tool to be available in a language other than English or Spanish, let me know. What this basically looks like is there's some hidden tabs where you've basically just got the English that the tool uses. There's the Spanish, but we can add other languages if you feel that that would be beneficial to running the workshop. So if that's the case, please send me an email, and what I will do is send you the translation page such that it can be easily, it's set up if you want to add additional languages. It just means that you've got to find somebody to do the translations, which I know from experience can be tiresome to do. So just send me an email if you'd like to add an additional language to the tool beyond English and Spanish. As people would see the way that it's programmed, you've got these hyperlinks at the bottom, so rarely will you actually have to touch these links. You just click through and it will come through as well. I did. If you'd like a Arabic version, then just send me an email and we can sort it out. The only concern I have is that the syntax is set up in English, so if the language works the other way, then it might be a little bit difficult, but nonetheless, we can look at, if you want to nominate somebody to work with me to set up an Arabic version, then no problem at all. And I apologize if people are writing things in the chat and I miss it. As I said, I'm not sharing training with anybody. So yeah. Okay, P2 is just the user guide. So this is mainly for you guys. It won't really be that useful to people in the workshop. The idea here is that there's color codings for specific things, black being the heading, orange being a section, blue being a question. So wherever you see a blue box and wherever you see, sorry, let me zoom in a little bit more, a yellow box with these red things with text inside, that means that you're being asked a question and you need to put an answer in. And what you'll find is that the tool won't let you progress until you've entered in what you need to enter. Otherwise, a few things as facilitators, down the bottom, you will need to zoom in and out each time because I can't know what size screen or projector you've got. So just remember, if it comes in small, for example, here, it might open like this. You'll need to come down and zoom in a little more. That's just something that you'll have to do once you know what projector you're on as well. All right, so hopefully there shouldn't be too many questions. Again, raise your hand as we go if you've got questions. P3 is the user notes. The most important things to take away here is that we've got people in the global team. So we've got Jordan Chamberlain and Pete, I've forgotten his last name, who are going to help everybody populate modules 1 and 2 with the global data that they have available. So as we move through modules 1 and 2, you will need to be able to make sure that the data going in is correct, but there's going to be, at least I hope there's going to be some support for that to occur. And it's something that I'm trying to follow up with Jordan. I've sent him a few emails, such that they will help you populate this data, but you have to make sure that the data is correct. So if you're seeing numbers there that make absolutely no sense, that's where we have to have a conversation to do that. And part of that is to make sure that we can aggregate this data up to a global level as well. So that's the first point. The second point is that the way the tool works, as you move from module to module, if you go back to previous modules, it can be a little difficult to then basically what happens, it will change the way that data is arranged. So every time you click to the next module, just have a quick look before you go to make sure that the data that you have there is correct. Because if you need to change that data once you move ahead, you'll need to check all of the modules that come after that. So just as facilitators, just be really thinking about, before I click to the next one. Are we all happy? Is there anything that needs to change? Because it'll save you a lot of time as you move forward. Really, that's the logistics of it. And that then gets us to our first point here, which is about the different geographies that these workshops are going to be used in. So a couple things that we need to look at here. Why are we doing this in this way? We're doing this because we said the global team, Jordan and others, are going to help you guys populate the data. So to do that, they need to know about the area that you're talking about. So that's why we've got this detail here around the different provincial level and state level, or however you want to call it in your location. Basically, what we want is, if they're going to populate this data and they have to go and find some shape files or otherwise, it will help them draw a boundary around the area, because the tool works on a number of hectares that's being covered. So we need to be really precise around what area is each workshop covering. So Wanjiku and I and Chichi have been starting to work on this, and we've settled on this template here. So the first step that we actually need to do once we finish this session today is to set up a final copy for each of the workshops that are going to occur. And for me, this information is not quite clear to me. So I know, for instance, that we have there's going to be a workshop for the Nile Delta, for instance. There's going to be one in Morocco. Some of these are well defined, but some of them are less well defined. So for instance, in West Africa, I can see that there's some workshops that just say Ghana and Nigeria. So we need to make sure that we're actually setting out the area. For instance, is Benin and Togo included in that geographical workshop area? Is it the same or otherwise? So after this session, Wanjiku, Chichi, and I and some others are really going to push, particularly to the regional leads with you guys there, to make sure that we understand how many workshops are being run, and we've got this set up for each of those workshops. Is there any questions that people have on this submodule P4 before we move on? Oh, yes, please, Dr. Raju.
How do we get this map of our geography? We have taken Eastern IGP. So you have made any provision to any lat longs or coordinates of the boundaries we are providing?
Yeah, so good question. Thank you, because I noticed that a lot of people that had just done the practice one had not yet done the map. So the idea here is it's just a first step at guiding the global team so they know the areas that we're talking about. So just as an example, I had this up. All I did was I went to Google Maps and I put the 4 points in. And this is just for Eastern and Southern Africa, and we went, to 4 points, and then I just went down and took a screenshot down here. Took a screenshot, went back to Excel.
It's just a screenshot only.
At the moment, it's just a screenshot.
So you're not linked to any Google Maps with this application. Any link is not there.
No, it's simply.
If
please go.
Some point in our country, some given Google Map or whatever given in Google Map, so it won't link with that. Okay, got it. Fine.
Senge, you have your hand up?
Yes. Yeah, Senge from Rwanda. I had some questions, maybe on the nomenclature, because I was asked to provide names and I was not sure about some names of the domain and everything. And I was wondering if we do have a set of specific names that we need to include in those areas, or if these are just pure from our side to decide on these specific names? Because I know it's for me, it's a Central Africa crop, mixed crop highland, but I don't know then if that is the specific name that was being asked on this specific page.
Great, thanks for the question. Yeah, I think we're talking here around this like production domain area. The idea here is there's a few things. The first one is that really you should be talking with your regional leads to ensure that you're framing the right zone there. But something like the Central Highlands, as you mentioned there, that's fine to put in that production domain. It's just meant to be a short name. So for instance, if you come down here, it basically just creates the workshop name. So in this case, it's just taking the Chinyanga Triangle in the maize zone in Southern Africa. So have a chat with your regional lead. There is no, if there's a specific name for the area that you're working, that's fine. You can use that.
Got it. Thanks.
Perfect. So just some takeaways then. Make sure you're talking with your regional lead. We are going to really push over the next few days. And if Wanjiku is still on the call, Wanjiku is going to push you guys as well and push the regional leads to make sure that we know how many workshops are going to be done and to set this up so that we can give this document to the global teams. So the reason why it's in your guys' interest to make sure this gets done is because the global teams will have to do this many, many times. So the earlier you get this done and sorted, the quicker the global team can return this data to you so that you're ready to run the workshop. So please don't wait days and weeks to do this, because it makes everything. So be prepared that we're going to try and finalize this. And that's all the pre-module is. It's just setting the location of where we need to go. So happy days, that's the pre-module, and we move into module 1. So each module will have this welcome page. So this is the welcome page, and it just tells you the different modules that are there, what we're trying to do in that module. So you click down the bottom again. So this is, let me check. I've populated this with Samar's data. So we're talking about the Nile Delta and the Nile floodplains. In this particular example that you see up on my screen, and I've got 8 or so different ones from the people that sent me, more than just before, that we can look at just as examples, but we're just going to run with this Nile Delta and River Nile Plain floodplain example. So in this example, the 8 crops have been chosen and just written the 8 crops. What we're going to do with that in module 1.2 is just look at the area that that they cover. I'm going to stop because some hands have come up. Samar first.
Well, I had a comment about the number of the crops. And actually in Egypt, we have 2 seasons as shown here in the screen, summer and winter, and we have a 3rd season, but it's not very important. But for the 2 seasons, we may have a priority for, in each season, more than 8 crops for each season, not for the whole year. So the number of the crops of 8, it's very limited, because we have to put some important economical crops in the other category, because no space for putting it or listing it. So can we increase the number of the crops, or it should be not more than 8? This is my question.
Great suggestion. And actually, I've just changed the data to what was sent to me by our Indian colleagues and Raju. And here, what we actually found was the remaining crops was 34% in the monsoon, and then 36% in the winter. So I've seen that in the data that's come from India as well. Sengay, did you have a similar question or a different question? You might still be muted.
Sorry, can you
You're
come up
asking
again?
me?
You were asking about which question?
You've got your hand up, Sengay. I'm just checking if you have a question or not.
Yeah, I mean, on this particular page we are in, I was trying to just sum up everything. I just did all the percentages and everything, but it doesn't really make me click on the yield of crops. I don't know what's going on anyway. But,
so usually what happens if you can't progress, it's because there is still a box that you've missed. So the only reason that you wouldn't progress, do you have it open on your computer now?
yeah.
You could send a screenshot to the group, or otherwise, if you want us to look, or I can help you after.
Yeah, I think after it's better.
Okay. So just continuing then, so just sharing what was sent from Raju, what we can see is that, yeah, the remaining crops amount is very high, a third of the land area that's there. So coming back to your question then, Samar, is can we do more crops? Can we add the ability to do more crops? So we can. My only concern is the more that we add, the longer the tool gets and the more complex it gets. But that's not a good reason not to do this. So the question would go out, maybe if people open up the chat box, what in your location, how many crops would be an appropriate number of crops? So if everybody just goes to the chat box and puts in a number, just so I can get from the whole group, what's a good number? Assuming everybody can find the chat box, because nobody's put any numbers in yet. There we are. So Egypt 12. And I've let that person in. Dr. Vijay should be in now. 8 in Rwanda, 12. So it's 2 votes to go up from 8 to 12. Southeast Asia, 8 might be okay. All right, so what I'm hearing then is we can, so 10 in Ghana. So what I will do is introduce the ability. At the moment, it's maxed at 8. Maybe I can put the ability to go up to 12, but remember, you don't have to use them. So when we're in here, if we were to put 2, then it'll only ask for 2 as well. So in the next version that you guys see, you will have the ability to then go up to 12 crops instead of up to 8 crops. And there's obviously more than 12 crops in any system. Just remember that try and capture the 12 most important, because once we go into 13, 14, 15, it should be, lower importance as well. Cool. All right. So that's one change that we'll make is in module 1.1, basically what will happen is we will introduce some extra space for, it's not going to let me type because it's all protected, but what we will do is put extra ones. Yes, Dr. Raju.
Actually, one clarification I want to have you from is, we have in India data sets, some FAO's classification, 9-fold classification, you must be aware. FAO's 9-fold classification.
You might have dropped out there. I think we've lost Raju there. And I didn't get enough of the question to respond, unfortunately.
Are you getting my voice or not?
Okay, now you're back. Please ask again.
Okay.
Nope, you've dropped out. Sorry. Can you type your question in the chat box and then we can go from there because your internet is dropping out. Unless it's my internet dropping out. I hope it's not fun.
I think I found what he's referring to though, Brandon. This is Musna.
Yeah.
I'll just post a link here, but FAO seems to have this 9-fold classification where land is classified as forest area, area under non-ag uses, barren unculturable land, permanent pasture grazing land. I think he's asking whether we want to cover crops under all of these kinds of land classifications.
It's similar. Actually, what we have considered here is arable land. Arable land includes the net sown area, and then these 3 classes: current fallows, fallows other than current fallows, culturable waste, and one miscellaneous tree crops. That is also item is there. That's why all this area under going into the remaining crops. That is the reason why our remaining area is like 30%, something like that. So we should, which you suggest us, we should consider those things also, miscellaneous tree crops, and better leave that.
Okay, understood now. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so we can see that we've got these definitions of land. So what we're looking at here, so we talked about before around what is this tool. At the moment, this tool is an agronomy tool, so we need to be talking about cropland. So if we come back, that question is actually in the next version, changed around, I think, but yeah, so what we need to do is better define here. So it's written as what is the production area of this location in hectares. So for this purpose, we are talking about productive cropland. And I will change the wording there. So we would exclude forests and others. This has to be land that is arable, that is able to be put under crops. So we would exclude, we'd probably exclude pasture as well, because what we're doing at the moment is agronomy, and then we would build in additional modules for livestock or for forests or for pasture lands or others. Does that answer that question now?
Okay, forest anyway is not part of this thing, but that miscellaneous tree crops and all, whatever 9-fold classification, those things also should not be part of this. You mean to say, right?
Yes, it should be. So when we're talking about then entering the crops, they should be, so you wouldn't put forest there.
What do you mean by fallow here? Whatever in this fallow means, it is the fallow of 9-fold classification of FAO or something else?
Fallow means arable land where nothing is cropped in this tool. So like I'm thinking, say for you guys in pre-Kharif, there's going to be like, say 15-20% of land where nothing is actively planted there.
Actively planted in the current recent one, or because in FAO says the current fallows is the current previous year, and more than that up to 5 years it is other than current fallows, and then culturable waste is more than 5 years fallow. So that's why. So if you consider all, you're asking us to use only current fallows, or up to fallows, current fallows plus fallows other than current fallow?
Yeah, so what we're trying to collect here is for the last 5 years, an average of the last 5 years. So what we would be looking there under fallow is the percentage of land that is generally not planted in a particular season.
In the last 5 years we'll consider.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Then some other remaining crops area somewhat it will reduce if miscellaneous tree crops is also taken out of it. So will be like some 80%, something 85% like that we can cover crops.
Got you.
In that case, okay, maybe 10 to 12 crops. Okay, for this module, this sheet of module 1, maybe 10 to 12 crops will be enough for us, I think. Especially for the region which we are working right now. Otherwise, in future, some other regions if you work on, so they have more diversity, and up to 12 crops will be requiring. Other parts of the country. Another thing, just one more question I want to ask. what is the lowest geographic scale or spatial scale where we can use this tool? Like we have districts, on an average, we have sown area under different crops together, all together have some 10 lakh hectares, or you'd say 1 million hectare. So that we can use up to that level, or below that also we can use.
If you wanted to use it for blocks in India, then it wouldn't be problematic. The size of a block is sufficient in order to use it. So what I would say is don't go any. It has to be above village level really for this to work very well. You certainly wouldn't go below a village level for it to work, but you could do it at a block level in India if that was something that you wanted. There's no number of hectares that it's relevant to, but it is more useful when the area that you're doing is a similar production zone. So if you put together, 500 hectares over there that is a rice wheat system and 500 hectares over there that is like a potato mango area, then the tool won't work very well because it's trying to work with those two things. So in that case, I would say you should do 2 separate workshops because they are very different systems. That's the main difference that we would look at.
It should be homogeneous with respect to production system, you mean to say?
Exactly. Where possible, the tool will work best when you're doing a workshop, when you're running the tool for a production system that is similar across the region that you're talking about.
Okay, got it.
Perfect. I can see in the chat, Rick has brought up mango. And so perennials and in tree crops, they can be used here where it's important in the system. It's just a little bit difficult because the trees, for instance, you very rarely see a whole mango, like a whole field of mango. It'll be interspersed in the area. So because this is set up to count the number of hectares, we have to be a little bit tricky in how we bring in. Perennials is fine. So perennials take a, so just say that instead of wheat, this was mango. Let's pick something else, tobacco or tea or something like that. It's just a constant number across seasons because it's taking that number of hectares. But for tree crops, for instance, that are dispersed within fields, it's a little bit more difficult. We'll probably have to be a little bit tricky with the percentage if you want that to be part of your part of the tool, where you're going to have to do a little bit of tricky work around working a percentage. It's probably quite a small percentage, but because it's high value, it will come out at the end and be it'll be coming through there. In terms of, that's going to be pretty tricky small scale, even if they're high value. We have to ask ourselves again, this is a climate adaptation tool. So we have to ask how important to the livelihoods of people are these particular very small crops. So for instance, you can put, instead of urad dal, you could put oregano, and you would have very small percentage, like 1% and 1%, or something small. But when you came to the yield or the gross margin, it would be comparatively very high. It will still come out in the results as higher than that. Because of where we're going with this, what we're doing is calculating the economic value of different crops in order to then prioritize against. So you can put things that are very small area in 1.2, but if they're very high value or very high yielding or very high value and very high yielding, then they will come out at the end as significant in the cropping system. Okay, so Ali's question is, can we narrow down the focus just on one crop? So yes, you can put between 1 and 8 crops. So if you were 100% certain that you only wanted to analyze rice climate adaptation options, then the tool is set up that you would put one crop and you would put rice, and the tool will work then just to take you through rice. It's not quite worded like that because it's set up for the system. So if you only had one crop, then you would basically just put 100% for each of those, because it won't let you progress if you've got remaining crops too high. But yes, the tool is set up so if the discussion that you want to have is solely based on one crop, then you would put one crop there and the tool will continue to work. Just catching up on the chat. Did anybody want to raise any other questions? We are still talking about crops and crop area. So 1.1 and 1.2. Other questions?
Can I have one more? I'm Raju from India. So regarding sugarcane, also it is also a kind of perennial. It is 1 year crop in some areas and 1.5 years crop in some areas. With regard to sugarcane, we are having facing two issues. One issue is with regard to its yield. Yield is, as I mentioned in chart box also, it is around 60 to 70 tons per hectare. So that way you have to make provision up to amounts like highest 2-digit if possible, 99 tons per hectare or 100 tons per hectare. So up to that you have to make provision. And another thing is that like you mentioned, mango tree crop, it comes yield. Tea is no issue. Tea is pickings will be there all around. But if you take the sugarcane or this kind of crops, yield it comes and only at the end of this maturity period. Then I have a way to suggest. So last time you mentioned that when you put area in 2 places, both seasons, and so in that case, either we can put to show that it is a long-term crop and covering both the seasons, and it is standing in both the seasons. And so we mentioned same area in both seasons, or 1 or 2 or 3 seasons. And can we split that yield? Whatever, for example, at the end of the year, we are getting, let us say, 60 tons per hectare. So can we put 30 tons in Kharif season and 30 tons in Rabi season? And the price we multiply. So because the crop is there in both the seasons. So with respect to other crops, what is the relative economic importance of sugarcane? We can get assess, and in the outputs we can get that way. So that will be the more appropriate approach, what I feel. What do you say?
Thanks, Raju. The way that it's designed, if you split the benefit across both seasons, it won't necessarily, it will split the importance across 2 seasons. So I would say you're better off putting it all together. So for instance, if you're harvesting sugarcane, I'm not actually sure, when do you harvest sugarcane? Is it in the calendar?
It's like October, somewhere like that. Then
yeah. Okay. So after Kharif, so I would say that you would put that all in the Kharif, which I can see you've done already. So I would concentrate the perennials into when it's actually harvested. If it's harvested multiple times a year, then you would still then split that. But yeah, you would put that in that Kharif window, as you've already done.
You are getting an inflated picture of its importance, economic importance in Kharif, isn't it? It's you're getting a Rabi effect also into Kharif, and that its relative economic importance with respect to other crops, it is highly inflated, double impact. Isn't it giving a wrong picture, wrong signal?
It's not doubling because it's just concentrating into Kharif. But so what you're saying is that you would prefer that perennials were not assigned to a season. In this case, what's on the screen, but you would prefer that they were assigned as a perennial, such that you don't overinflate them. Is that's your suggestion?
Yes, splitting that, and we will get with respect to that season, as if that is whatever we are receiving at the end of its maturity period, we are splitting or distributing it to the over the period. How, for example, one crop maybe 1.5 years, another crop maybe 1 year. So that way we are like unapportioning, adjusting into the different seasons. Assuming
okay,
that,
I will look.
So that its relative importance will be comparable to other crops in that season.
Got it. And I'm saying that Ajit is agreeing, and Rika, is this same point or different point?
Brendan, related to this, just the fallow, because so that we can get out of this page, we need to make sure it's 100% fallow. So if we leave the next season blank, because we concentrate it on one season, then we have to add more in the fallow, which doesn't, make sense. So just flag that there.
Yeah, it's set up to be at a system level. I'll need to do a little bit more than can I just get a sense of, I'm pretty sure for EiA we should be doing it at a systems level. Is anybody planning on running a workshop that is centric to one crop only?
Yes. Yes, please. My focus is on rice.
Okay, so you only want to run this for rice and rice only, and not the system?
No, rice, only rice, crop rice.
All right, leave that one with me then. So there's a couple changes that we're talking about then here. The first one is better identifying perennials. And then the second one is making it clear if you choose one crop, how to then fill the next tabs. I think I've captured those issues. Senga, you had more to add?
On my case, we don't necessarily have furrows in Rwanda. So we might have other practices, but not necessarily furrows. So I was wondering then if I will put 0 or 100%, I don't know. Or if you guys will also include maybe other things, maybe crop rotation, because crop rotation is one of the key things we normally have in Rwanda rather than furrows.
So you would, if you don't have fallow, you would put 0% because it has to sum to 100% of the crops. In terms of crop rotation, we're capturing that in the sense of this is average area in each season. So your rotations are going to usually be seasonal. If intercropping, I know intercropping can be partly important. You still got to then play with the percentages a bit to think about the area in order to capture that. But it does capture the diversity of different crops and crop rotations. But we have to take the average of 5 years in order to get the ability to calculate the importance of each crop at the end.
Got it. Thanks.
Raju, do you have another question, or is that your previous hand?
It's previous hand. I'm removing that one.
Yes, hand. No problem. I'll just lower that for you. Okay, so yes, so I'm going to look at making it clearer for single crops for the rice example. And we're going to have a little column that says, is this a perennial? And if so, it will ask in a different column so that that's occurred. So great. Thank you for the suggestions. This is why we're here in this meeting now, to make sure that we can cover everything. So keep coming with these suggestions, please. So we're going from the area. What we're then going to is yield. So note that the next version is already updated, that 20 ton is not the limit. So that's already removed. So that suggestion has already been taken on board. There again will be a separate column for perennials, how much they yield for the year as well. I understand that this is a bit of a difficult question in that we have to take the average yield across the whole zone that you're talking about. So I definitely understand that that is difficult. However, it's the only way that we can aggregate this to that level. Remembering you also have some support from the global team with these numbers as well. Does anybody have any particular feedback or comments on this 1.3, which is about average yield for crops by season? Is there any concerns? Excellent. We will, let me just check the chat so I don't miss anything. Sorry, so we're talking about the grasslands in Egypt. The question would be, could that land be cropped, or is it grasslands for the fact, that it's because it can't be put under crop? My initial response, and I can go and check with EiA as well, my initial response is that EIA doesn't work in grasslands, so that the tool at the moment would be focused to that productive cropping land. Leave that one with me, and I will follow up on that and come back to the people from the MENA region. All right, next module is 1.4. So this is around the income for each of those. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. Okay, so the question in the comments from Trang is around how you would differentiate yield between the period. So remembering that we'll have a new column because that's a perennial crop, or an annual or a perennial, there'll be the column for that. You would need to think about taking an average of that, so it's probably going to be the average of a mature tree. That's where we'll go with that. So moving on to 1.4 is income. So again, I understand it's different. So you've got to take a market average really for the crops at harvest time. So at the end of each of those seasons, because that's when the majority of people will sell their crop. So the idea again here is that we're taking the number of hectares under a crop, we're timesing it by the average yield, and then we're timesing it by the average income. So that's how we get our number at the end. So again, I understand it's a bit of magic in these numbers, but that's how the tool is going to populate here. Does anybody have any comments around 1.4, which is the income tab?
We are getting some byproduct also. Should we be included in that? Not only main product, that is also some income.
It should be the economic value of a ton, not necessarily at market, but the economic value of that to the farmer. So if you're getting byproduct in stover or other things, then that should be factored into the economic value of that product. Yeah. Sama.
In the last 5 years, we have a dramatic changes in the prices of the crops, and some crops become much more economically efficient than others, and the prices of the yields are increasing, especially for the last year. So when we get the average of the 5 years, we get much smaller, proportion or importance of the crop, because the last 2 years, or especially the last year, is completely different than the other 4 years for the average. So how we can, because when we calculate the average, is not representative for the what is happening right now.
Yeah, Egypt is undergoing rapid inflation, and because of the devaluation and because of several reasons related to that. And one more thing is that in the past, a crop that was less important has become a priority crop now. For example, soybean. It was not popular in Egypt, but there is a national priority on soybean. So because of its huge use in other sectors. Yeah.
Great question. This is one that I've thought about a lot, actually, because this is a tool that's, for me, a better question would be the expected average over the next 5 years rather than the last 5 years. The problem is that then we get into this trap of we're creating more guesswork around the results that come out. I'd be interested if people want to go to the chat box and just type in their preference. Would their preference be for average for the last 5 years, or would it be expected average over the next 5 years. People want to go to the chat box and just type past or future, just so we get a sense of the room. While we're waiting for people to do that, then Samar, please.
For the expected average, how we can predict the expected average? What
That's the
for
problem.
agriculture, it's very complicated to expect the average. It changes from year to year, and you know, right now there is a lot of economical drivers and forces that changes the market of the crop yields. So how we can be sure about these expectations, or use it as a base for adaptation strategy or something, or future planning? I think it's a little bit tricky to consider.
Exactly, but that's the only workaround of, if we're not happy with the average in the last 5 years, what's the alternative? So that's why it currently asks about the average over the last 5 years. We could also bring that down to the last 3 years to reduce the volatility and the skew that would come. But we've got to be able to assign a number here. If the question is, are we happy with the last 5 years? Do we go to the last 3 years? Or how else do we do this? Ibrahim?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, my question is, when it comes to yields, is there any possibility to capture the variability across production systems? Because for rice, for instance, we are dealing with 3 production systems: can be irrigated lowland, rain-fed lowland, or upland lowland. And also the yield can vary very much across these production systems. And we also the adaptation for different crop production system can be different. So how can you capture this variability across the production systems with these two?
Great question, but I think you've answered the question in the way that you've phrased it. So you've used the term production systems. My response to that is that you cannot have a single workshop that covers multiple production systems. You should be having workshops for each of those 3 production systems that you mentioned, not doing one rice workshop, but you need the lowland production system and the highland production system, or the irrigated production system workshops, because when we said that you need similarity in that production system for the tool. So consider how many workshops you actually need in order to capture that.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. So I think then we've come to the point in 1.4, and it's going to be the same with 1.5 on. We've got a lot of variability and change occurring. We can't predict future. We can't know what the price will be in the future, but there's variability in the past. So the option that we have is to leave it as it is, which is an average value over the past 5 years, or we bring that down to, say, 3 years to knock off 2 years of variability. Does anybody have any opinions? Leave it as is, or bring it down to 3 years instead of 5?
One, we can have 5 years, but it is better to have consideration of some inflation factor, growth factor.
But again, we'd be guessing future inflation rates, right? So I'm not sure it helps us.
I think the best way would be to look for the last 3 years. 3 years might be fine. And then instead of us guessing for the future, because the future is uncertain. I mean, you guys have seen how the dollar is skyrocketing these days in terms of exchange rate. So I guess 3 years from the last 3 years, that might make sense.
And I see, I did your comment around inflation at 41%. So firstly, apologies. That's horrible. But also that's going to throw out some of the numbers as well. Let's leave that one with me. I'll have a chat with some people, see if there's a way that we can deal with this, and particularly with the global team, to see what we're going to do about how to deal with that. It may be in situations where inflation is that high that we need to ask the question differently than the other parts as part of the global project, because that will just throw things out completely. So let's park that one, leave it with me. Yeah. Okay, just going to our comment from EiA colleagues. Okay, so the question here is, what's the difference between 1.4, which is marked as income, and 1.5, which is marked as gross margin? The difference is that income is the economic value of 1 ton of product, whereas gross margin is by hectare. So if you think about the difference here, 1.4 is about the value of 1 ton of product, and that includes the side benefits as well. So it's not 1 ton of grain sold, 1 ton of grain maize sold. It's 1 ton of grain maize sold plus any sales of residue or any associated things. It's the value of that crop. 1.5 is the value on a per hectare basis. So that means costs out. So don't consider the cost of production in 1.4, but you do consider it in 1.5. Is that clear for whoever at EiA asked that question?
Okay.
I'll assume yes.
All right. Can I clarify that in 1.4 is the income, including the production cost? So the production cost is not deducted, right?
Straight value of per ton. So no production costs. Production costs are factored in 1.5, but not in 1.4. You can't factor in production costs on the income because it relates to the per hectare as well. So in 1.4, it's the economic value without any costs taken off. 1.5 is where you factor in the costs. And I take your point, Samar, around having definitions.
Understood.
Okay, if I'm right, that means that the 1.4 is the gross income, and the 1.5 is the net income. Is that so? 1.4
you can use
gross
those words.
income. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But 1.5 is not used anywhere in the calculations for outputs.
It's not because nobody has made the decision on which one should be used. So you may see that the output might change based on that. But at the moment, the output is based on income, not on gross margin. It's an argument that I'm having with a few people higher up because I think that the gross margin is the more important one than the income. But I'll park that one and we'll come back to that in the next training.
Actually, I put it that way, means when the value is at stake, when you are relating with respect to climatic hazards, so not only leave aside profit or margin, first whatever your inputs, all gross value on the field, that is at stake. So even 1.4 is the right approach rather than 1.5, in my opinion. So that whatever it is done in output, that's okay. But the only question what I'm asking is 1.5 you are planning to use somewhere. So another thing is that 1.5, it is not per hectare. Whatever you mentioned is per ton. If you are producing 1 ton, so how much margin is there? Profit margin. It's not per hectare.
That's an error. It should be per hectare. The gross margin.
You have given us a
I'll update. There's a good chance that 1.5 would be removed by the time we actually implement the tool because it's not currently used. It was there to capture in case we want to do additional analysis. It's not actually shown in the tool. So park the question around 1.5 and we'll come back to it next week because it may actually drop out and we may just finish at 1.4. All right, so coming towards the end, so this is the final tab that we'll discuss today, and that's the results that come through. So basically what you see is the top 10 crops by season. You see the 1,000 hectare area, and you see the economic value. So what in this example, which I think is still the Nile, sorry, I haven't updated the name. What we see is that wheat in Rabi comes out first. And in terms of relative importance, it's very important and it tapers in. And you'll see this in most locations. But basically what we get at the end of module 1 is the relative importance of different crops in the different seasons. I can paste a different example just to see. Well, let's take one from Southeast Asia. So here it was that obviously rice is most important and it's dominant in both. And then you see some cassava and maize, much less important. So the idea here is that as we move through the tool, the crops that are have the highest economic value will be prioritized more than the ones that don't. So it's just an intermediary endpoint, but what we get from that first module is basically the relative importance of different crops in terms of their economic value, that economic value being number of hectares times average yield times average income or gross income to get there. Does anybody have any questions on that? Great. All right. So just quickly, it's likely to be very late tomorrow my time, or even Friday morning, I apologize. I will send module 2, and hopefully if I've got time, I'll send some updates to module 1 as well. Just to give you a very quick look at it, what you have is you'll need to fill in the climate hazards, you'll need to select which crops you want to talk about, and then you'll see how it fills. So if you were to choose only 2 crops here, then you'll only need to do 2.1, 2.3 and 2.4. If you were to choose 8, then you'll have to do all 8. So it's just, as you're working through it this time, because you're just learning the tool, suggest when you come to the filter in 2.2, you can just change these 2 to no, or 6 to no and 2 to yes, and then you'll just play with 2.3 and 2.4. It won't ask you for these additional ones. By all means, if you want to fill it properly and you want to do all of it, there's no problem there as well. But we're using this just as a learning experience through the tool. So I would suggest that you should just leave 2 yes and 6 no, just so you get a feel of the tool. What you'll get at the end then is the impact of different climate challenges and the vulnerability of different crops and seasons that come through. So basically what this means is, let me pull across. In terms of our training schedule, probably, I said Wednesday for this, but it's probably going to be Friday, unfortunately, because I'm a bit behind. I will send out a video that covers module 2, like I've sent with module 1. I will send you a clean version of module 2 that you can play with, and I'll send you an example version of module 2. So again, what would be great is if you watch the video, you can email me any comments if you're watching it on YouTube, or if we get the PowerPoint up, then you can leave comments in there. Return that module 2 back to me, preferably not half an hour before this next meeting, because then I can't put it in and share with everybody. So the earlier you can get that back to me, the better. That means you'll have had to play with module 2, you'll have sent me any issues, and then we'll go through in that 2-hour session. We're going to go through module 2 just like we did with module 1 today. Raise your issues, we can talk through things, we can agree on things, and then we can move forward. So that's the plan. And then the week after we'll do module 3. I can see people asking for a WhatsApp group. I can certainly do a WhatsApp group, but you would need to send me, I'd need to get everybody's WhatsApp number in order to do that, because I'll only have very few of you on WhatsApp to do that. So if you want to join a WhatsApp group, send me a WhatsApp and I will send it to you. I'm more than happy as you're going.
These are major reasons from farmers as to why they disagree or agree. You have enough space to go to input that, and that we also practice when we agree the answer.
Sorry, can you go from the top?
Maybe you are speaking about fertilizer application and you describe broadcasting. You describe maybe replacements. Okay. The type of applying your fertilizer, and you're just talking about that input. The farmers must see how you say this broadcast.
I believe that they are not with us, right?
In reality, would that really help them to appreciate and understand what we are talking about? To your organization of that event, all the things that you put in place, ensure that the effective teaching and learning is done. Was that the best? So in terms of logistical organization as well, we also want to get the feedback from these partners so that it will inform improvements in the next set of events that you can want. Good.
Thompson, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear it. Could you type into the
have the space for you to provide the feedback on the video
your internet's cutting in and out a bit, so we can't.
At the end, I don't think you would want what you are training the farmers on to just end with them. You would be happy if what you train the farmers on, they also go and train others, right? Would that be your joy? That after the technology,
Thompson,
they are also going to train others. You would be happy, right? So
Thompson, you're dropping in and out. Could you please type into the chat so that we can get the full understanding?
They are not with us. I don't think that they are talking about something else.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we've got a plan for moving forward. Ajit.
Yeah, mine was a very question related to the crops. We may have different types of the same crops. Like let me take rice as an example. You may have basmati rice and the normal rice. This can be considered as two different crops, right? For example, wheat also, we have durum wheat and bread wheat. So we may also have the same crop performing differently in different parts of the same agroecosystem. For example, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt have different climatic situations. So can we consider these as two separate cases or separate crops, although they are the same crops, so that we can somehow make the system work, Thanks.
So the main question would be, are they affected very differently by climatic hazards and climatic events? And do they have very different yield or income differences? Because my initial reaction would be to keep it as one. But if they have very different incomes, very different yields, or very different reactions to climate hazards, or very different adaptation options, then they would be split. But if they are mostly similar in most of those, then you would aggregate them together.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Perfect. All right. So next stages, you will receive something from me most likely Friday. I apologize for the delay in that. I'd like to make some of these changes before I send you the next version as well. If you would like to join a WhatsApp group, please either type it in the chat here or email it to me, and I will start a WhatsApp group for those that send me the number. And if you've got anything as you're going, if you find that you can't enter a number, it might be a bug in the system, anything like that, email me or WhatsApp me. I'll put my number right now in the chat. And I'll try and get to you as soon as I can. There is chances that there are some bugs still in the tool. So if you're just crashing and you've stopped and you can't progress, let me know. and let's get rid of the bugs before we go to the workshop. Perfect. All right. So basically that's the end for today, unless anybody has anything else they want to discuss. I'll stay on the call. If you're done with this call, feel free to leave. If you want to discuss anything else, then I'll stay on for a few minutes if you don't want to raise it in front of everybody or otherwise. But thank you, everybody, for coming to the first training. I hope it's helpful. Really good suggestions to build in, which I will do my best to meet for you guys as we move forward. Please, if you get something from Ranjiku or your regional lead about setting the geographic scope, please don't wait days and days in order to get it. Let's finalize them. It's really important, and then we can move forward. But thank you, everybody, for the training. Really excited to work with all of you, and have good afternoons, days, evenings, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.